Major General Mark Bartman is the Adjutant General of the Ohio National Guard. He is a member of the Governor's Cabinet and is responsible for the command of the Ohio National Guard and the military readiness of the Ohio Militia. The Ohio National Guard consists of the Ohio Army National Guard, the Ohio Air National Guard, the Ohio Military Reserve, and Ohio Naval Militia, which totals more than 16,000 personnel. General Bartman leads the flag officer heads of these components in the day-to-day operation and management of the readiness, fiscal, personnel equipment, and real property resources of the agency. He was the Air National Guard lead to the Chief of Staff of the Air Force for the Total Force Task Force to develop strategic options for the active Guard and Reserve total force capabilities to meet the current and future Air Force requirements. General Bartman graduated from The Ohio State University in 1982 and entered military service through the Air Force Reserve Officer Training Corps program, and he was a distinguished graduate from Detachment 645. General Bartman has served in various operations and command positions in the United States Air Force and Ohio Air National Guard and has commanded the 180th Fighter Wing in the Ohio Air National Guard. He is a command pilot with more than 3,200 flying hours, including 29 combat missions in operations Provide Comfort, Northern Watch, and Southern Watch. I think we need to give General Bartman a huge Rotary welcome.
Well, good afternoon. So thank you very much for having me here today. To President Paul and Mike and Executive Director Scott, thank you very much for having me here today. Really, truly appreciate it. I don't have a whole lot of time. I don't have a whole lot of slides, but I'm going to go through them fairly quickly because I want to provide you all the opportunity if you'd like to ask any questions for me or things that we're doing, because what I'm really going to talk about here over the next about 20 minutes is just a very brief overview of the Ohio National Guard and what we do. There's a lot of other things that are going on right now all over the world that we are involved with. As we like to say, the sun never sets on the Ohio National Guard, and that is the truth. I have soldiers and airmen deployed all over the world right now, doing anything from combat operations in the Middle East to helping citizens down in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands recover from the incredible hurricanes that we had back in September. And it will be a long recovery for many of those individuals that are down there. We'll start off with just a short video here because I think this does a really nice job of just kind of giving you a very broad overview of what the Ohio National Guard does. So Rob, if you would start that.
A trusted team of soldiers and airmen serving our communities, our state, and our nation. A diverse team of men and women with proven reliability that is ready when disaster strikes. When our state and our nation need us, we are always there. Today's National Guard is a vital component of our nation's warfighting capability. More than 24,000 Ohio Guard members have deployed in service to their nation in support of every major military campaign since 9/11. We are the stewards of the equipment and resources to assist in times of need and possess the expertise needed to respond to our nation's challenges at home and abroad. Today's National Guard is much more than 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks a year. It is much more than our soldiers and airmen. We are supported by our families, our employers, and our communities. These are relationships enriched through the shared sacrifice in service to our country. They are relationships grounded in integrity and inclusion. They are relationships that anchor the organization in our communities and in our partnerships around the globe. Since our founding more than 200 years ago, it has been our goal to be the first choice. We are an essential team member, providing capabilities to achieve state and national priorities. The Ohio National Guard is committed to excellence and driven by innovation. Our ranks are filled with the best and the brightest. We are in your communities and stand ready for when you need us. We are the Ohio National Guard. Always ready, always there.
Thanks, appreciate it. And if you could, next slide, please. So I need to start off probably to make sure that everybody has sort of the same foundation in understanding the National Guard, because it's routinely that we get confused with how we operate versus the active component. So next slide. So first of all, we have what we call 3 missions. The first mission is our federal mission. And when we're deployed overseas, then typically that is when the National Guard, for any of the states, falls under the President of the United States and the Secretary of Defense, and then whatever military component, whether it's the Army or the Air Force that we happen to be in. But we only fall under the President typically during those times when we're deployed. If you go to the next slide. Other than that, the majority of the time, actually, we work for the governor in Ohio or for any state where the National Guard happens to be. And there are, for those that don't know, there are actually 54 National Guards, or 54 National Guard entities. There are the 50 states, 3 territories, which is Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and Guam, and then the District of Columbia. Every one of those 54 has an Adjutant General, sort of. The District of Columbia is the only one that's very unique. They actually have what they call a commanding general, and that individual works for the President of the United States, is actually appointed by the President. All the other 53 Adjutants General are appointed by the governor or the territorial governor of that National Guard. So we're a little bit different in that matter. There's some very unique opportunities that brings to us, though, and that is the fact that normally, day to day, like myself, because I work for the governor, I'm under what we call Title 32 status. Title 32 provides a lot of opportunities for us to be able to do things that our active component cannot do. And I'll give you just a very brief example. In 2016, when we had the Republican National Convention up in Cleveland, because we were under Title 32 or under the control of the governor, I was able to provide some of my military police soldiers to be able to go up and work alongside of our law enforcement partners up in Cleveland to help maintain that we had security as far as the RNC was concerned up there. An active duty individual cannot do that, and it's by law. It's written in the United States Code, in fact, and it's part of what we call the Posse Comitatus Act, which was written subsequently to the Insurrection Act. So it says basically that as a uniformed individual, if I'm on active duty, I am not allowed to carry guns against the citizens of the United States of America. However, the National Guard can do that only when we're under the direct control of the governor of that particular state. So something that's very unique about the National Guard. Next slide, if you would. So a little bit more specifically about Ohio. As was mentioned, almost 16,500 soldiers and airmen in the Ohio National Guard. The unique thing about us, of course, is that, and as the Guard, is almost 80% of those individuals are what we call part-time. So they're individuals that are out there amongst the community working other jobs, Monday through Friday, weekends, whenever, and they put that uniform on whenever they happen to be called, or the one weekend a month, or other times throughout the year as needed. As I mentioned here just a little while ago, I got almost 280 soldiers and airmen down in Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands right now. Many of those individuals had other jobs, and because of many of you that are employers out there that have maybe military members in the National Guard that work for you, first of all, let me say thank you very much, because we couldn't do what we do without the employer support throughout the state of Ohio. But all of these individuals that do this on a voluntary basis. And it's just really, truly amazing to me is that sense of wanting to do something bigger and better and great in your life that wants you to be able to join the military. And then in this case, obviously, to be able to volunteer at a moment's notice and go help out your fellow citizens somewhere else around the United States. Next slide. So Ohio, as hopefully everybody in the business community would know, is a very strategic location, right? Almost 60% of the U.S. population is within 600 or so miles of the state of Ohio. So for us, that makes us unique. We happen to host several unique capabilities for FEMA Region 5. We actually touch 7 of the 10 FEMA regions if you draw that 600-mile circle around the state of Ohio. So we actually support a lot of the other FEMA regions and states that are around Ohio. Next slide. Oh, Yeah, you can stop right there. So the Army, my Army side, is the 5th largest Army National Guard as far as the state size goes in the country. And we have 6 what we call major subordinate commands. And you can kind of see the patches up there, and I'll go from left to right here very briefly for you. Is the 16th Engineer Brigade, which does pretty much what you might think it would. It does heavy engineering primarily, vertical and horizontal construction type things. I have the 37th Infantry Brigade Combat Team, which for anybody that knows history, just celebrated this year their 100th anniversary. It was actually constituted in World War I as the 37th Division and went and fought over in France and was there towards the end of World War I and fought some major battles during that time period. I have the 73rd Troop Command, which is primarily handles a lot of the military, has all of my aviation assets on the Army side that we have here in the state is under the 73rd Troop Command. The next patch that you see up there is the 174th Air Defense Artillery Brigade. It does basically what you would think an Air Defense Artillery Brigade would do, with the exception of right now I have elements of the headquarters of that are in Washington, D.C. They're on a regular rotation where they go up there about every 3 years to defend the National Capital Region. So they are part of the soldiers that are up there 24/7 defending the National Capital Region since 9/11. And then the far right patch there is the 371st Sustainment Brigade. Again, kind of does what you might think, provides a lot of transportation and other sustainment to the Army forces when they are deployed. Next slide. On my Air National Guard, it's the 2nd largest Air National Guard in the country out of the 54. I have 4 flying wings around the state and 6 what we would call geographically separated units. Again, very briefly, those wings that you see up there from left to right on the patches. The 121st Air Refueling Wing down here at Rickenbacker flies KC-135, the large aircraft refueler. The next one would be the 178th Wing over at Springfield near Dayton. And they used to fly F-16s several years ago. They transitioned to the remotely piloted aircraft. They are in the process of transitioning from what it was called the MQ-1, which was the Predator, to the MQ-9, which is the Reaper. It's just a larger remotely piloted aircraft. I have airmen that are sitting over there at Springfield right now that are flying combat missions all over the world from Dayton or from Springfield, Ohio. They're based there. So this is one of the things that as we transition, especially the reserve component and for the National Guard, into new missions, this has kind of brought up some very unique, interesting ways that we have to deal with making sure we're taking care of our airmen. Because if you think about it for a second, this is the way things go. I have a young airman that goes into work after kissing his wife, goodbye in the morning and seeing his kids off to go to school. He goes in and gets into a box and for 12 hours is flying combat missions, is killing bad people, dropping bombs on people. At the end of that 12 hours, he walks out of there, gets back in his car, drives home and has dinner with his wife and kids and kisses his kids to bed. That is very difficult from a psychological perspective to deal with. So we now have full-time, what we call psychological health professionals. We have full-time chaplains that work at most of my wings that do these kind of things to make sure that our airmen are taken care of, and as well as their families too. The next patch that you see up there is 179th Airlift Wing, which is up at Mansfield, Ohio. They fly C-130 aircraft, very old aircraft. We're working on trying to modernize those. And then the far right patch on top is the 180th Fighter Wing up at Toledo, Ohio. It flies the F-16. They also have a 24/7 mission, 365. It's the Aerospace Control Alert mission. So we have aircraft that sit alert up there since 2008 was when they picked up the mission. But really, it kind of came about after 9/11 when obviously the military was accused, and rightly so, of focusing outside the United States and not inside the United States for threats that might be out there for us. So, and then along the bottom, just very briefly, are some of my geographically separated units. The 123rd Air Control Squadron on the bottom left there, down near Blue Ash in Cincinnati, just on the north side of Cincinnati. And they do, again, what kind of the name implies, they control the airspace when they deploy overseas for aircraft that are flying around. I have a small weather flight down at Rickenbacker that primarily deploys with the Army brigades when they go overseas to provide weather support for the Army. I have a Red Horse unit, which is a rapid engineering deployable heavy type of a combat unit that does heavy engineering type things. Consequently, if you can see the patch, it's a Red Horse sitting on a plow. And then we also have the 251st, 269th Combat Comm units, and a 220th Engineering Installation Unit, which is over at Zanesville. The other two units are over at Springfield. And they do primarily, again, providing support to communications and to the warfighter when they're deployed overseas. They can also do things, and we actually use them during the Republican National Convention as well, to set up so that as a backup in case we lost communications here in the state, then they can set up both internet as well as satellite communications and those kind of things for us. So next slide, if you would. So we're distributed, the Ohio National Guard is distributed around the state of Ohio, as you can see there, over 37 counties, and almost 7.2 million square feet of infrastructure that we have. If you would, the next slide, Rob. And I got to wait here for the map to come up. Now, it may be a little hard to see, but there's green dots and blue dots on that map. That indicates where all of my soldiers and airmen live throughout the state of Ohio. We pretty much have a soldier and airman in almost every county in the state. So in almost all 88 counties, I have members of the Ohio National Guard that live there. So I always tell people, as I said, that you may or may not even know it, but there's probably a guardsman that lives in your subdivision someplace or pretty close by, and you just don't know that because they're one of that 80% that's part-time that doesn't wear their uniform all the time. They just put it on maybe early on a Saturday morning or late on a Friday night when they're going to drive to drill someplace, and then they come home Sunday night late, and you may never have actually noticed that they were in the National Guard. Next slide. I'll mention this real quickly here because although it's a little tongue-in-cheek, but I like to say that I think we're a pretty good deal for the state of Ohio. My state budget is a little under $9 million. I bring in over $600 million of federal funding to the state every year, and the taxes that's paid on that is about $10 million. So when you look at it that way, I bring in more state tax than I take out of the coffers to pay for what we do in the Ohio National Guard here for that. And you can see, though, from an infrastructure standpoint, from the airframes and the other types of equipment that we have, almost $3.5 billion worth of assets here in the state of Ohio, which is why we're one of the largest National Guard entities out of the 54. A couple of quick things that we do for the community that most people don't know about is, first of all, I have soldiers and airmen that are embedded with just about every counter-drug task force here in the state of Ohio. Work very closely with a lot of the federal agencies that are out there, and they do some really great stuff. They're mostly analysts, so they don't get involved with, you know, the actual drug bust or something like that. For somebody. But I will mention here real quickly is that so far this year they've been able to work with law enforcement to seize more than 350 pounds of heroin, 130 pounds of fentanyl, and over 20,000 opioid pills so far just this year. So, and we've been doing this now for quite some time. This is all paid for through federal dollars, so not 1 cent of state money goes to be able to support a lot of these counter-drug task forces here in the state. The other unique thing that we've really started on here just a couple years ago is what we call our public-private partnership program. The Air Force calls it P4. State of Ohio uses P3. Some other companies may use slightly different terminology to it, but basically what we're doing is we're trying to get with those communities that where we have armories or bases or wings located and try to work together to figure out what are the things that we can do to hopefully make it so that it's easier for us to make sure that we stay there in that community for the long term. So there's all different kinds of things that we've been doing here lately, and I'll just mention, I guess, one briefly here, and that is that one of the new things we've done over the last couple of years are building what we call these training and community centers. So there's a brand new one that opened 2 years ago up in Delaware, is the newest one that we have, just right north of the airport up there. And what we did was we partnered with the city of Delaware and with a couple of other community organizations to build 2 buildings, and they kind of make a L shape. And basically the Ohio National Guard sort of owns one portion of the L, the community owns the other portion of the L on that. And where they meet is what the Army likes to call a drill floor, where most of you would call a basketball court. And it also has a really nice kitchen area facility in there as well. And so we and the community of Delaware share all those facilities. We have some really nice briefing rooms and meeting rooms and things like that that's in our facility that we allow the city of Delaware to use. So there's some other cities around the state that have picked up on this, and they've approached us, and we're working right now on trying to figure out ways to maybe build some new armories that we can use for those kinds of things. Next slide. The other thing that we do is, for the last 22 years or so now, is we have supported areas around the state of Ohio with my medical professionals that would, in some cases, be what you might consider to be underserved areas as far as the medical profession goes. Although just recently we did 2 counties this year, one in Madison County, an event in Madison County, an event up in Union County in end of July, early August time period. And we worked with the county health departments there, and we went in with my medical folks, some of the medical people there from the county, and were able to take care, free of charge, several hundred citizens of those counties over a 2-day period. We usually do it like on a Saturday and a Sunday. So, and we've done this all over the state of Ohio since 1995, as you can see on that slide there. And it's a great way for us to be able to kind of give back to the citizens of the state of Ohio so far. So far, we've done, as you can see, almost 13,000 Ohioans have been served in the last 22 years doing that. Next slide. And finally, community support. Obviously, I know this is part of what the Rotary does, and it's a big part of what we do because we are in the communities. That third mission I mentioned at the very beginning is what we consider to be community support. So we feel like it's very important for us to make sure that my airmen and my soldiers are part of the day-to-day goings-on with the things in the community. So it can be anything from, and you saw in that video, what the governor had and the First Lady instituted here a couple years ago, which was the Start Talking initiative to try to get to our youth today, to get them to understand not to start doing drugs, because once you start, it's an easy path to get down, especially with the types of drugs that are out there today that our youth are getting involved with. We specifically, the Ohio National Guard, our part of that is the Start Talking initiative. So we partner up with the Ohio State Patrol, where we have a trooper and a member of the military, and we go in and we talk to high school youth about why they shouldn't do drugs. And from sort of the law enforcement side and from the military side, it's a little bit about leadership. So, right? It's a little bit about, if you stay away from this and you don't get involved with it in the first place, there's a lot of great things that you can do with your life. The problem is that a lot of the youth out there today are starting to get involved in this kind of stuff a little too soon. Finally, the Ohio National Guard Scholarship Program. Fortunately, we have a General Assembly here in the state of Ohio that is outstanding when it comes to supporting the Ohio National Guard. So every year, we have appropriated right around $19 million from the General Assembly that covers over 7,000 of my soldiers and airmen that are getting their college paid for 100% by joining the National Guard. So anybody out there that has kids that are approaching college age, or maybe grandkids approaching college age, you can get free college by joining the Ohio National Guard. So we're one of the few states in the country that offers 100% scholarship at all public schools. If you want to go to private school, that's fine too. The only caveat there is that we pay the public price to the private school for their college for that. We have actually just recently expanded this. There are some of the universities here in the state that are adding the opportunity for my soldiers and airmen to actually get master's degrees. So just last year, we started a program over at Wright State, over near Dayton, to be able to have individuals to be able to get their master's degree program through the scholarship program. And we're working on actually expanding that to their families as well, so that spouses and or kids will be able to do this as well. So we've been getting some tremendous support from the state. Next slide. State Partnership Program, another thing that probably a lot of people don't know about the National Guard. So across the entire country, there are about 70 partnerships of countries with states all over the world. Ohio has 2 countries, the country of Serbia and country of Hungary. Hungary, we've been partner for over 24 years now. In fact, next year we'll celebrate our 25th anniversary as having Hungary our partnership. Serbia, we just celebrated the 10th anniversary last year with them. We do somewhere in the order of about 20 to 25 military-to-military exchanges every year with those two countries. And initially started out, of course, after the wall came down back in 1989. In the early 90s, a lot of the countries that were there in the Central Europe and eastern part of Europe area, they wanted to partner National Guard states with some of these countries to help them sort of modernize their military, to get them out of the old Soviet model, bring them more towards the Western model. Since then, as I mentioned, we have the National Guard now does over 70 of these partnerships, and literally they're all over the world. They're in Asia, Africa, South America, Europe, just about every place that you can imagine we have partnerships now. And the combatant commanders that cover all the regions around the country have said that this program is one of the jewels of what they have to do on a day-to-day basis, because it's all about making this relationship between the militaries of a lot of these countries. Some of the newest ones are countries like Djibouti, Vietnam are some of the new countries that we just added over the last couple of years to that. So, and those states and territories that participate in this, it really is an incredible program, and it's really more about a friendship at this point than it is anything else. My counterparts, the Chief of Defense in Serbia and Hungary, are very good friends of mine. The Ministers of Defense, we get to meet with them every year when I go over there to visit, when I do my visits, and there's just a great relationship that we can build between doing those kinds of things. Very briefly here, because I'm just about out of time, is something that we started at the governor's direction about 2 years ago, although we've really been able to get some great traction over this last year. In fact, I'm going to speak tomorrow morning as the keynote speaker for a national conference over in Dayton for cybersecurity. And what we did here is, after the governor said, hey, we got to figure this cybersecurity thing out, I said, yes, sir. And so I started what we call the Ohio Cyber Collaboration Committee. If you haven't heard of it, there's over 200 members now that are public, private members. They're K through 12. All of the higher education organizations here in the state of Ohio are members of the committee. And we work through these 4 lines of effort that you see up there. So education workforce, standing up a cyber range, standing up a volunteer cyber response force, and then best practices, as well as sharing threat information, unclassified threat information amongst the committee out there. So if you're interested in wanting to be a partner of this, I'll be more than happy to get you hooked up with my POC for your company. But the bottom line is that when you have, in the education piece, I'll throw at you just a quick numbers here, that in the United States, they estimate that by 2020 or so, there'll be over 300,000 unfilled cybersecurity jobs. Worldwide, almost 1.8 million unfilled cybersecurity jobs. The main reason is because the type of individuals that were graduating from college and high school right now are not the kind of individuals that have the skills or the capability to be able to walk right into industry and to start doing these different types of cybersecurity type jobs. So my education and workforce development folks, which by the way, the committee is chaired by the Ohio Department of Higher Education here in the States. I mean, we have everybody on board that understanding that we need to change what we're doing right now. So that means changing the whole dynamic on how we educate those individuals as they're maybe freshmen through senior in high schools, if they decide that they think that that's what they want to get into is cybersecurity, or for those individuals that do go on to college and into 4-year universities, is that making sure that when they graduate from Ohio State or whatever university it happens to be, that they already have experience through internships, through working on our cyber range with companies that and schools that are going to be running it, that they can walk right into a job and be able to do exactly what that company wants them to do for in that particular area. So some really exciting things that we're working on. The volunteer cyber teams, we will have volunteer cyber teams on a regional basis around the state of Ohio. I've already got probably a half a dozen companies that have offered up individuals from that company to be able to participate in this. But the bottom line here is that if you have a small business and you don't have the resources to be able to have your own IT or cyber defense department, you'll be able to access these cyber defense teams where we can have people come in and help you Obviously, you have to be willing, if you're a private entity, you have to be willing to let somebody onto your network so that they can take a look. But what they can do is that they'll be able to provide you where your vulnerabilities are, where that you need to maybe change some of your operating procedures and things like that to make a more secure environment. When you look at the amount of money that gets lost every year through attacks, cyber attacks that are out there, the average company, in fact, is about $4 million is about what it costs for every time that they get hacked in today's environment. The numbers, as I'm sure you're all aware, from Equifax, from Yahoo, from which affected me personally, was the Office of Personnel Management when they were hacked about a year or two ago. I mean, the bottom line is that, and I joke about this, is that all of my information and my family's information is out there for anybody to see and use because it's been hacked so many times. I just pretty much have given up trying to protect it. So what we're trying to figure out is how do we build the right kind of cybersecurity infrastructure from the ground up? And the only way to do that, in my perspective anyways, is to start with our youth and to get them to understand, that, and again, I'm kind of joking here, but I have seen it, that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is not a good password. Please don't use that as your password, for your cell phone or anything else. It just doesn't work. So next slide, if you would, Rob. And I think that's basically it. Tried to keep it to 30 minutes. I'm pretty close. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have here. I'm not sure how much time we have here, so a couple of minutes. Yes?
I've got a couple. I'm assuming there's Marines under the Naval Militia.
So the way that my Ohio Military Reserve and the Naval Militia work is that in Ohio we have what we call the organized militia and the unorganized militia. So the Ohio Army and Air National Guard are the organized militia. The Military Reserve and the Naval Militia actually are what we call the unorganized. So they're purely voluntary individuals that belong to those organizations. They do not get paid for the service that they do. It's just out of the goodness of their heart. Generally, they're individuals that either maybe previously served and are now just too old to continue to serve, or they're individuals that for whatever reason couldn't get into the military originally, or had another job in life and then decided later on that they wanted to try to help out. The Military Reserve is about 300 members and is kind of spread around the state of Ohio. The Naval Militia actually is only about 20 individuals, and they're up at Port Clinton, Ohio, up on Lake Erie. And what they basically do, they have a couple of boats. And so during the summertime, when I have units that are up at Camp Perry and they shoot out towards Lake Erie, we have ranges that actually shoot towards Lake Erie. They patrol the impact zone up there to make sure that pleasure boaters stay out of the impact zone when it's hot. So, but again, other than we take care of paying for the gas for the boats and some repair and things like that, everything that they do is just out of the goodness of their heart. So, great Ohioans that want to try to continue to help out and serve for the state of Ohio. So, but I do not, I've met all the members of the Naval Militia, and I don't remember off the top of my head if there are any ex-Marines. I know they're pretty much mostly all ex-Navy individuals that served at some point on active duty. Yes?
Could you talk a little bit about what are the personality profiles of hiring a veteran and how to hire out of your pool of folks?
Sure.
And what are the pros and cons, and how do we go about doing that?
Sure. So the question was, how do you go about hiring a veteran, and if there's any particular ways that you should do that? There's a couple of organizations or individuals that I have working for me that their specific job is to connect with the community and business partners out there. I'd be happy, we can send that information to you if you'd like to send it out to all of your membership. We'd be happy to do that. But basically, that's all they do is connect veterans or members of the Ohio National Guard that are looking for jobs in the community with businesses that are interested in hiring them. What we always say is that if you're willing to hire a member of the Ohio National Guard, you're going to get somebody that is regularly drug tested, that knows how to show up on time, that is generally self-motivated in what they're going to do out there. There obviously is going to be a time, though, when that individual is going to have to come do their military duty. They're going to have to work at some point. And as you all could probably imagine, with after 17 years of continuous combat, The tempo has not slowed down at all. As I mentioned at the very beginning, the joke about the sun never sets on the Ohio National Guard is absolutely true. So, you know, I have people all over the place, and they go every so often to do those things. The deployments can vary. It can be anywhere from 90 days, as short as 90 days to as long as 10 or 11 months. So it just depends on what service you happen to be in and where you happen to be going as to how long that individual might be gone. But again, I truly appreciate all of the support that we have from that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, General Bartman. Thank you, General Bartman, for speaking today and keeping us informed about our National Guard, because it is Ohio's National Guard. Also, thank you for your service. And to all our veterans in the audience today, thank you for your service as well. Please join us again next Monday. We will be having a presentation about the National Veterans Memorial Museum. So hope to see you then. Thank you.